Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out here on a rainy day. I'm glad you made it in, hopefully not too wet. We did see a little bit of sunshine come through. As folks continue to come in, we're just gonna go ahead and get started. I just wanna extend a warm welcome to you all. Thank you again for joining us today for this citywide community event on immigration in Burlington, understanding the moment and strengthening our community. It's actually really great to see all of our neighbors coming together, our partners, leaders gathered with a shared commitment to learning together. My name is Laura Sanchez-Parkinson, and I serve as a city council for Ward 3 here in our city of Burlington. As a new city councilor, I'm proud to be serving in a community that shows up for one another. A community that even in difficult moments, like the recent increased surveillance of our immigrant community, we stand together and we support one another. We are living in a time when national rhetoric and policies can create uncertainty and harm our immigrant families. That reality is felt here in our neighborhoods, our schools, and our workplaces. Tonight is about understanding, grounding ourselves in the history and the context, but also it's about strengthening our relationships and our collective ability to ensure that every member of our community feels safe, valued, and supported. On behalf of the City of Burlington's Racial Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Office and the University of Vermont Division of Intercultural Excellence, I want to welcome you here tonight. This collaboration reflects a shared commitment to engage and to support our community on difficult and timely issues. Thank you again for being here and being part of this work together. I want to also note that we have live translation and will be available through an AI tool that we are testing out to provide this live translation through Wordly. To listen to your preferred language, there is a QR code right over here that you can scan with your phone, and if you have your headphones, you're gonna be able to listen to this conversation in your preferred language. Thank you once again for joining us. And without further ado, I will turn it over for our guest speakers today. I am very excited to welcome Dr. Pablo Bose, who is a professor of geography and geosciences at the University of Vermont.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you for organizing this. I'm going to try and not be too lectury. So I was asked to just give a little bit of an overview of immigrants and migrants in Vermont. We're in this particular moment that feels really unprecedented in terms of the kind of xenophobic rhetoric and policies and targeting of immigrants and migrants. But I just want to sort of talk very quickly about placing this in a historical context. The last time we really saw this kind of xenophobia in the US, this kind of overt xenophobia exercised by the federal government, is really in the 1920s, right? We've seen this in other times as well, but the effect of the kinds of rhetoric, policies, constraints, and restrictions that were put on in the 1920s fundamentally changed the way in which the US looked, right? It was at that point, at the end of the 19th and early 20th century, that you had a pretty robust set of diverse communities across the country, including here in certainly certain parts of Vermont. And you had a lot of the same rhetoric that you hear today aimed at Mexicans, Somali, Haitian immigrants. You had the same kinds of rhetoric aimed at Irish, Italian, Jewish, other immigrant groups. And so the effect of those kinds of restrictions back in the 1920s meant that for 40 years, there really wasn't a lot of immigration into the US. When immigration opened up again, most of that immigration meant immigrants coming from different places. They did not, however, come to Vermont. So that's one of the reasons Vermont looks so different than other parts of the country. What I'm mostly going to talk about today, really quickly, is talking about some of the different pathways and statuses that bring people today to Vermont. So a little bit about labor migrants. I work most closely with the refugee population, so I'll talk about refugees, asylum seekers, humanitarian parole, as well as other immigrants who come here for other reasons, for jobs, for education, to reunite with family. So the foreign-born population in Vermont is really historically up in the northern part of the state. When I first moved here, it really was mostly Chittenden County. There's also been migrants and immigrants in other parts of the state, but really up in northern Vermont. I moved here from Toronto. I was living in a city with a large foreign-born population, and I did research on immigrants in large cities, and then I moved to Vermont, which didn't seem to have either. But what I found was there were really, really vibrant communities of refugees, of migrant farm workers, a number of different immigrant groups who were here and who had been here certainly at least since the 1980s. So there's a number of different pathways that people have taken to come to Vermont. As I said before, a lot of, if you look at the 19th century, a lot of that was labor migration of people coming from Quebec, French Canadians coming to northern Vermont. And throughout as I said, by the time US immigration opened up again in the 1960s, you didn't see the same pathways of immigrants who were going to California, who were going to New York, Florida, Texas, states like those which had large cities and jobs. So you didn't see that one particular pathway. You also didn't see in the 1960s, actually before that, the 1920s and 40s, you didn't see the same kind of African-American migration that you saw internally in the US, again, following jobs, transportation, and other kinds of things. So those are a couple of the reasons that Vermont was as white as it was. Where you really start to see a big change is in Vermont, in northern Vermont, when the refugee resettlement program starts. The refugee resettlement program in the US formally starts in the 1980s, and in Vermont it really starts in around 1987. In Vermont, you see a lot of similar trends as you see across the country. So you'll see here, these are some of the numbers of different groups who came in the late 1980s. People were coming from Vietnam, being resettled as Vietnamese refugees. In the mid-1990s, Bosnia. Late 90s, Europe and Asia. In the early 2000s, you had a series of resettlements from Africa. One of the largest resettlements was from Bhutan, so Bhutanese, Nepalese, Lhotshampa, between about 2008 and 2016. That was a very, very significant resettlement, but there are other communities who've come as well. And then I'll qualify this a little bit, that the Afghans and the Ukrainians who came, most of them did not come as refugees. They came through a different pathway, which is called humanitarian parole. And I'll explain why those legal statuses make a difference in a moment. I just put the last group on there just because, yes, we live in a country now where the only refugees who are accepted in this country are white South Africans. Out of the 4,639 refugees who are actually resettled this fiscal year in the US, all but 3 are Afrikaners. So I will just let the absurdity of that sink in. But of course, there are other migrant populations as well. There is a group of seasonal agricultural workers. So in the orchards, for example, we've had a long-standing migrant worker community come from Jamaica, other places as well. Migrant labor in a number of different other industries, dairy, construction, domestic. The dairy industry, as you may know, in Vermont would likely have collapsed with the absence of migrant farm workers. Asylum seekers is a newer group in Vermont. Traditionally, we haven't had a lot of asylum seekers. There was a significant growth between 2021 and 2024, 2025 for specific kinds of reasons I can talk about later. But we also have other groups, a smaller number who come here for education, family reunification, and others seeking jobs. So the challenges are significant for immigrants who come to a place like Vermont. Small populations, so you have larger communities in other places. I was just talking to a reporter for Digger who was asking about in-migration, out-migration. And the US doesn't do a very good job of tracking secondary migration, where people are kind of going to. But the main reason people will move somewhere else, for example, a few years ago, a number of Bhutanese, Nepali moved to Ohio. And I remember being asked, why are people leaving? Don't they like Vermont, or whatever it was? And I said, well, there was more available housing, and there were language communities that people had. And you know, Dayton and Columbus are large Bhutanese cities now, in the same way that East St. Louis is a big Bosnian city. So smaller populations, integration challenges, and I would say racial hierarchies, right? That refugees, when they come here, refugees and other immigrants are slotted into American racial politics, which I will not go into, but a definite challenge. I would say on the service provider side, there's often a lack of knowledge of the communities who are coming in, the distinctions between communities, not treating all immigrant groups, including from the same background, as being monolithic, that they don't have the same views, needs, desires, et cetera. Culture clashes between different communities, duplication of efforts, and of course now, you know, we're confronting an openly antagonistic federal government, one that is, as I often say to my students, what's the problem with immigration? Right? We see immigration pitched not only as a problem of undocumented migration, but also of legal migration, right? So both of those are under assault. And then, you know, issues around affordability, accessibility. I wanted to say a really quick thing again, just about legal statuses and why this is significant. Different kinds of immigrant populations have different kinds of precarity, depending on what kind of status they have. And it gets really confusing. I said a moment ago, the Afghans who were brought here to the US were not resettled as refugees for the most part. They were brought in through a temporary program called humanitarian parole. It's a temporary status. It's one that needs to be renewed. And at the time, even though Congress extended some refugee-like benefits to humanitarian parolees, they did not extend protections to them. They did not extend status. And it's those kinds of things that have contributed. You will sometimes hear people say, well, you need to come in the right way. Well, I immigrated to the US. I immigrated before that to Canada. These are incredibly laborious, expensive, and kind of bureaucratic processes. It takes a long time, even if you do things the right way. So it's holding also immigrants to a standard that we frankly don't hold for ourselves. Anyway, all right. I did want to point out a couple of other things really quickly. One of the things that I've done over the last number of years is I've done polling in Vermont on support, in this case for the refugee programs. Despite all of the the kind of national rhetoric, what I've found in Vermont, at least, there's been pretty consistent support for the refugee programs. And that, in fact, has gone up over the years. When I've asked where should refugees be settled in Vermont, the most common answer was evenly across the state, which is not very practical, but until 2021, about 99% of refugees in Vermont were resettled in Chittenden County. And within Chittenden County, it was really Burlington and Winooski. It's only in recent years that we've now had Afghans, Eritreans, some Venezuelans, and others in Bennington, Brattleboro, Rutland, some other places as well. The impacts that immigrants have had on multiple landscapes is really significant. So my students and I have documented new businesses, community centers, all kinds of recreational spaces, all sorts of places where you really see this profound impact of newcomers to the state. This is a building I've done a lot of work in, the Old North End Community Center. Downtown, it's a really vibrant space in which you see a whole range of different kinds of activities. And so, as I said, new businesses, new all sorts of other kinds of things. I mentioned agriculture before. This is the refugee agriculture program down at the Intervale and Ethan Allen, New Farms for New Americans, which has been going strong now for 12 years, 13 years, serves about 350 families. And as I said before, it is hard to think about the Vermont agriculture as a whole without considering what it would have done if we didn't have migrant farm workers. The number of family-owned dairies has shrunk by, I think, 3/4 just since the 1950s. And those that remain are really very much dependent on this skilled labor. As I said, there has been an opening of new sites for immigrants and migrants, including refugees, but also we've seen, as I said before, new asylum seekers in places that there hadn't been as many asylum seekers. There's a lot of different reasons for that. The complications of who crosses the border when are much more nuanced than sometimes I think appears on the news. For example, in 2021, 2022, there was this surge of people crossing the border, the northern border, to the point at which Swanton sector became one of the largest border crossing areas. But the people who were crossing, 70% of them were actually Indian nationals. And they were crossing not to come to Vermont, they were crossing to go to Boston or New York or somewhere else. And it had to do with all kinds of other politics in Canada and in India. So often the story is a lot more complicated than it seems. I'll end with just this quick image from one of the resettlement welcome centers. This is in Bennington. I went down to Bennington and Brattleboro, again, as a person who is used to being in very large cities. I already felt Burlington was pretty small, and then I went to Bennington and Brattleboro, and I was like, wow, these are really small places. And I thought a lot about what it means to resettle in a place like this. We asked people, where do you get food? And, where do you get halal food and things like this? And it's an enormous number of changes that people are taking on in settling into new communities. But it would be hard to imagine not only how is the economy sustained, but how do we sustain our schools, our tax base, businesses, if we don't have new people coming in. It is a fundamental mistake to think that you can move forward without new blood. And so I'm sure I don't have to convince anyone here of that, but okay. And so we'll move to the panel, I think.
Thank you, Pablo, for your presentation. For all your research, all the work that you do. that you've done over the years and the work that you do with this community. Pablo has done a bunch of these panels for us at UVM, and so we're really grateful for his expertise. My name is Amir Ahmed. I serve as Vice Provost for Intercultural Excellence at University of Vermont. My English pronouns are he, his, and him. And it's really an honor to be able to moderate today's panel. And before I make my remarks, I want to welcome our panelists to the stage. Miriam Atesham Kading, from the Director of Programs for Multilingual Learners at Burlington School District. And as I call your name, you can make your way to the stage. Abel Luna from Migrant Justice and Justicia Migrante. Melissa Bata, Executive Director of Vermont Interfaith Action, and Wei Wei Wang, Executive Director of Vermont Professional Color Network. I want to thank you all for being here today, and we're looking forward to the discussion. This is a meaningful topic that we gather here today to engage that is both deeply personal and profoundly structural. And I wasn't going to share this, but after Pablo's remarks, I realized that I should share something personal about myself. And it was connected to the fact that you talked about the Bhutanese Nepali community moving to Columbus and Dayton. And I'm born and raised in Springfield, Ohio, which is right in between those two towns. So I can personally attest to the fact that that migration has been happening, both from that, plus one of our employees in our division that works in another part of UVM now, was born and raised here in Burlington, went to UVM, works at UVM, but parents and family moved to Ohio. And then also I realized that I should probably mention that because I'm from Springfield, Ohio, you probably have now all heard of Springfield, Ohio, because of the temporary protected status that Haitian immigrants experience and has been revoked. And we became the case study nationally. My family immigrated there in 1973 before I was born. My brother and sister's families still live there. They're deeply involved. The Haitian community coming to Springfield, Ohio, if any of you consumed any of the media about what was about Springfield, the Haitian community was the first good thing that ever happened in my lifetime in Springfield in terms of the deteriorating population, the deepening of poverty in the post-industrial, prototypical post-industrial Midwest town. So I wasn't going to share that, but Pablo mentioning that, it made me realize that I should probably share that. And that's within the context of us talking about what's happening in Burlington, but also within the context of this is within a broader national landscape that is playing out right now. So as we reflect on this moment related to immigration, we recognize that it's not just a policy issue, right? As I'm mentioning, it's about people, it's about relationships, it's about the conditions we create for one another to live with dignity, safety, and opportunity. Here in Burlington, we see every day the ways immigrant and new American communities strengthen our schools, our workforce, our neighborhoods, and our shared sense of belonging. At the same time, we are navigating a broader national and global context that feels uncertain and at times harmful, where rhetoric and policy do not always align with the values many of us hold. So in my role at University of Vermont, I often think about what it means to move beyond statements of support and towards sustained, coordinated action. How do we ensure that our systems, whether it's in higher education, local government, healthcare, or community organizations, are responsive to the lived realities of immigrant communities? So for today's discussion, we will explore these questions and learn from those who are leading on the ground, and we will have time for questions following some of the questions that I have prepared for them. So let's begin with introductions of our panelists. Could each of you share your role with your organization and a bit about the purpose and focus of your work? And I think, do we want to start with that? Yep.
Hi there, my name is Melissa Bata.
Is the audio?
Hi there. Sorry, I live in Barrie, so we don't have these fancy setups when we go to meetings like this. I'm not used to life up here in the big city of Burlington. My name is Melissa Bata. I'm the Executive Director of Vermont Interfaith Action. Vermont Interfaith Action is a statewide network of congregations and organizations working on issues like immigration, housing, and racial justice. At our core, we bring together people of faith and of goodwill to take collective action so that our values show up not just in what we believe, but in how our communities actually function. I also want to mention that I am also married to an Israeli Palestinian who has immigrated here. So I know very personally the complexities and the difficulty of navigating our immigration system.
Hi, I'm Miriam Edisham Kading. I will just let you know at the outset that the Edisham part is half of my original name, which is Ehtisham Zadeh. The Kading is a name of a person I'm no longer married to, but I kept it for my children. Ehtisham Zadeh would denote to somebody who might be familiar with that language group that I am Iranian, and I'm Iranian American. I was born in the U.S. To an immigrant father and a U.S. mother. I was educated largely overseas in an American school system and came back to the United States as a refugee at the start of the Iranian Revolution. And all of that's pertinent because I know what it's like to feel displaced. I feel displaced all the time. I also know what it's like to be struggling to learn and to learn in a language that's not your original language. And I also recognize myself as a person of tremendous privilege. Never meant to be an educator, but once I started working with a population that I viewed as not only particularly promising, but also particularly vulnerable, I just couldn't stop. So I'm like 47 years into working as an educator, primarily with students from backgrounds other than English who are aspiring not just to learn English, but to learn in English. My job title is one I made up for myself. I'm the Director of Programs for Multilingual Learners in the Burlington School District. And I chose that mouthful because I don't direct the students and I don't direct the teachers. I imagine myself as the pin that sits on top of an umbrella that encompasses lots of different initiatives that offer support to students from language backgrounds other than English, whether they're legally identified as EL, English learners, or not, and also to their families. And I'll talk more about that later, but the focus of my job is to make sure that every part of educational life, participation in the life of school and schools is fully accessible to students from language backgrounds other than English, and that parents can become engaged, involved, and that the voices of students and families are heard in the decisions that are made daily in classrooms and all the way up to, when I have the opportunity, decisions made by our school board for how we should organize schools. That's the core of what I do. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Weiwei Wang, she, her pronouns. I'm co-executive director of the Vermont Professionals of Color Network, and I'm an immigrant myself. I came here from China in 1989, and my father immigrated here for a job in 1985. And I wish I had had an opportunity to work with you when I was a kid, because I think I would have really benefited as an English learner. So what VTPOC does is we focus on 18 plus. So what happens when folks get into the workforce? So our mission is to advance the economic and social prosperity of the BIPOC community, inclusive, of course, of the immigrant community across the state of Vermont. And we do this through many different channels, including community building, business technical assistance, data collection, and to a certain extent, advocacy across the state, making sure that employers understand what folks need. And I think I'll stop there.
Muy buenas tardes a todos, tengan todos ustedes.
Más cerca, para que te escuchen.
Permíteme presentarme, mi nombre es Guadalupe Díaz. Formo parte de la comunidad de Justicia Migrante. ¿Por qué digo que formo parte de Justicia Migrante? Porque la comunidad nos ha apoyado en alzar la voz, en hacer valer nuestros derechos, porque la fecha de agosto, del 28 de agosto, fuimos arrestados injustamente con mi hijo por la migra, por ICE. Íbamos rumbo al trabajo y pues ¿qué ha hecho la comunidad de Justicia Migrante? Pues hacer valer nuestros derechos y nos ha apoyado en todo. Gracias a ellos hoy en día estamos libres, porque lo que hacemos aquí en este país es trabajar. Pues trabajar no le hacemos a nadie daño a nadie, pues lo único que queremos es alzar la voz y pues trabajar es nuestra prioridad y gracias.
Okay, chido. I'll be interpreting. My name is Abel Luna, and this is Guadalupe. My name is Guadalupe Diaz. I'm part of Migrant Justice. I'm part of the migrant community. Why do I say that? Why do I say that I'm part of the migrant community? It's because, the mission and the goal of Migrant Justice is to build our collective voice, our collective power and analysis to transform the conditions that we're facing. Sharing briefly, I was detained by ICE on August 28th of last year. We only have power when we come together and build a community. That's why I'm here today in front of you, being able to, provide a little bit of my experience. Together as a community, we ensure that our human rights are respected and enforced. I'm only here because of the work that we do as a community as part of Migrant Justice. My name is Abel Luna. I'm also part of the Migrant Justice team, Migrant Justice staff, and I'll be sharing some information and also interpreting to Guadalupe. I don't have anything else to add. I think Guadalupe did a great job.
Okay. So our first question is for both of you. So Migrant Justice has been at the forefront of community mobilization and advocacy since 2009. So if building on Professor Bose's insights, how has your work evolved in response to the changing and increasingly diverse needs of the immigrant communities? And in this moment, how do you continue to center human dignity in the face of ongoing anti-immigrant rhetoric?
La pregunta está de cómo es de que estamos luchando con todo lo que está pasando, con este sentimiento antimigrante. Okay, so I'm going to take the first part of the question, and then Guadalupe will take the second part. I'm going to come a little bit closer. I think just briefly wanted to share that, Migrant Justice is a farm worker-led organization since 2009. Migrant Justice got started after a death of a young farm worker named Jose Obed Santos Cruz on a dairy farm here in the state of Vermont. And since then, Migrant Justice has been organizing, building community, building power, and building our analysis on how to transform the conditions that we face, as Guadalupe shared. Since early on in Migrant Justice, we develop a recipe of success. And what we do, we hold community asambleas or community assemblies, which are basically spaces where our community, comes together. We share a meal, we talk to each other, we learn about the issues that we have, the problems that our communities, are facing. And together, we think about how to transform those conditions that we're facing. So really the asambleas or the community assemblies are, places where we listen to, the collective problems or patterns that we're starting to see in our communities. Whether you're working on a dairy farm, whether you're working in construction industry, whether you're working on a hotel industry or on a restaurant, washing dishes or whatever you're doing, we've seen similar conditions, regardless of where you're working. Our community, it's facing very similar issues. I'll share some of those. I think just briefly mentioning that it's important to understand, and I think it was mentioned at the beginning, but without migrant workers, migrant labor, migrant hands, a lot of the industries that are in Vermont wouldn't exist today. One of the things that we're noticing or that we're seeing, for example, again, whether you're working on dairy or whichever other industry you're working on, we see similar issues such as wage theft, for example, workers working really long hours, 12, 14 plus hours, without getting the minimum wage. A lot of people don't have a lunch break. A lot of people don't have a day off per week. You get fired from the job just for speaking up and sharing their reality. And so, these are conditions or issues that are happening, across industries. And so what are we doing to ensure, that we continue to organize and to change that reality that people are facing? Again, one is building community. So we do that by the assemblies, the asambleas. Migrant Justice has a team of field organizers. So we go out to the fields, we go out to people's homes, and we try to build relationships. We try to build trust with each other, with our community, and try to organize. Because people are moving from their industry, not moving, but there's an increase in these other industries that I mentioned. That means that we're seeing other different issues. For example, people living in overcrowded housing conditions. One of the things that was happening, from 2020 to like 2024 was that if you wanted to rent a house here in Burlington, you needed to, or in Chittenden County, anywhere in Vermont, if you're a migrant worker, you needed to provide a social security number. That was something that was required in order to put a roof over your head. We pushed for legislation, that changed last year. So now you can rent a house, you can rent an apartment, regardless of who you are, where you're coming from, or your status. Social security number is now optional. You can provide your driver license to do that. So we continue to push for legislation. That's one of the things that we're doing to try to address some of the conditions and the issues that our community is facing. We continue to build a coalition with other organizations to have a stronger outreach, to have to educate our community on the rights that we have, how to access these rights. We continue to organize, develop, relationships with government agencies such as the Human Rights Coalition, so that when there's human rights violations, there's consequences to the people that are violating our human rights. But really, like the heart of what Migrant Justice does is building our community, and I really want to emphasize the asambleas piece and the relationship building. If you don't have trust, if the community doesn't trust you as an organization, as an organizer, there's no access to the community. You're never going to learn the issues that people are facing, the conditions that people are facing. And it is through, the visits, the relationship building, the asambleas, the sharing a meal with each other, sharing a space, it's building a stronger migrant justice, building a stronger community. So we continue to do that, and through those, through that, we again, I think I might be repeating myself, but we continue to learn about the conditions that people face, and then through that, we focus on whether that's a legislation, whether that's a local campaign or a campaign against, a corporation such as Hannaford's. As some of you know, we're calling for meal with dignity to be adopted within the Hannaford's supermarket supply chain. And so, but that's only possible through their relationship building. If there's no trust, there's no organization. And so I think that's what I'll share, and then I'll pass it to Guadalupe for the second piece. Si quieres compartir un poco, Guadalupe, de la siguiente pregunta, de qué estamos haciendo para el momento y lo que hemos estado enfrentando. Y si quieres compartir tu historia un poquito más, si no está bien.
Pues
Hablarle más al micrófono sin miedo.
sin miedo, pues la comunidad de justicia migrante, pues que su trabajo ha sido reunir a la gente hispana, pues a manifestarse con las empresas de Hannaford sobre el precio de la leche, que pues que es injustamente lo que, pues el salario pues que se ha manifestado, que han proporcionado. Y pues en la comunidad de justicia migrante, pues el apoyo es en alzar la voz. Como les decía hace rato, nuestros derechos han sido a veces violados por el racismo que se ha estado viendo en estos últimos años. Pues la comunidad de justicia migrante pues ha apoyado mucho en equipos legales, por ejemplo en mi caso mío y el de mi hijo, pues
un segundo para interpretar y después
no,
sigues. Okay. Yeah, so as on the second question, as we're seeing and we're experiencing, there's a lot of racism and discrimination. So part of what Migrant Justice does, what we have been doing to deal with all of this in the rhetoric that we're experiencing, as we were mentioning, to continue to build a relationship with our own community, build trust. And that means not just on the streets, but also really, the Meal with Dignity program, at the farm level, trying to demand people have better wages, demand that Hannaford joins the Meal with Dignity program. And, we can only do that by bringing people together, building community, and I'm going to share a personal experience of mine. Si quieres compartir tu experiencia.
Y como les decía hace rato que pues hemos tenido una mala experiencia con yo y mi hijo, pues como les comentaba, en agosto del 28 de agosto del 2025, pues fuimos arrestados por ICE rumbo al trabajo con mi hijo, y pues sin presentar ni una orden de aprehensión, pues nos detuvieron forzosamente, pues, y pues, como le digo, no presentaron ninguna orden de aprehensión y pues nos forcejearon y pues no pusimos resistencia, pero sí hubo maltrato de parte de nosotros, que pues que hemos sido privados de nuestra libertad por 2 meses y pues, como les repito, gracias a la comunidad de justicia migrante nos apoyaron con los abogados y pues hoy estamos libres.
Okay. Yeah, and part of what Migrant Justice is doing during these times is to build stronger relationships with organizations that do legal work or legal counsel For example, when people are arrested, there's very little support around that. From my experience, I was arrested on August 28th of this past year. I was heading to work with my son, and some cars pulled up to us. They forced us to get out of the car. They got physical with us. We were thrown in prison. We were thrown in jail. But again, as I mentioned earlier, it was only because of our community and the relationship building that we have been doing that I'm able to stand here in front of you and share that experience. And just to share a little bit more, as an organization. Yeah, we're experiencing crazy times, very tough times, not just with Trump. I think immigration is something that has been part of Vermont, not just these past 2 years or past 5 years or 10 years. Immigration and people being kidnapped and separated from their families, disappearing from their communities. It's not new to Vermont. This has been happening for a long time, even before migrant justice existed. So it's important to give that context. So when migrant justice was formed, part of what migrant justice is doing is to build to educate our community about our rights, what to do if we're detained, what to do if, we're in immigration detention. We've been building one of the most robust rapid response networks across the country with over 3,500 people that are part of the rapid response network. In case somebody gets detained, we send a message and hundreds of people show up. You guys were able to probably seen the news on March 11th. We've done over 50 rapid response trainings across the state to make sure that organizations, people, and communities know what to do in case a community member is detained or immigration shows up to your house. So we've been doing a bunch of trainings. Also working with legal groups, as well as Lupe mentioned, to try to build more of our legal capacity. We're not lawyers as an organization. We don't know everything, but trying to build those relationships comes in handy for when somebody gets detained. And as we were mentioning, last year, there was a little bit over 100 arrests in 2025 by immigration. A lot of those arrests happened without a warrant, without order from a judge, and really just being rogue agents, detaining everyone based on their color of your skin, the language that you speak, and that's a pattern that we've seen across the country, and that's why we continue to build a strong coalition and networks to try to address some of these issues that we're seeing. So yeah, we'll leave it at that, and if there's any question, we can come back to that.
Thank you to both of you, and thank you, Guadalupe, for sharing your personal testimony. We are really grateful for you to be willing to share such a hard experience. Wei, as you know from the work of Migrant Justice, immigrants often relocate in search of employment and career opportunities. Through Vermont POC network, how are you approaching the economic prosperity of immigrant communities, particularly considering our evolving workforce and policy landscapes? And what challenges and opportunities are shaping the employment and career opportunities for immigrants in Burlington?
You're not joking with those questions. You're going real hard. I just want to start my response actually kind of stemming off of what Abel said around access, around relationships actually and partnerships and trust building. At VTPOC, our work is framed around accessibility. And what do we really mean when we talk about accessibility? We think about in 6 different ways: availability of a resource, awareness of a resource, affordability of a resource, accessibility of a resource, accommodation of the resource for the individual groups, and acceptability, meaning trust of the resource. So when all of these components are available, that means everyone in the community has access to the resources at hand. In Vermont, we have so many incredible resources, mostly because we have high taxes, but also because we have like 6,000 nonprofits across the state that are serving us as individuals. I mean, we have Vermont Language Justice Project here as well tonight, who does incredible work around language access for the community and also for the country, let's be honest. So it's important to frame it around that because in Vermont, the work that we do, we know that there are resources available, but how do people access it otherwise? Are they aware of what is available? For the most part, no. Why is that? Because a lot of organizations do not take the time and the opportunity to actually go and meet people where they're at. They're making assumptions on what people need and prescribing down to them. And so part of the work that we do is to create those access points to the resources. We like to think of ourselves as the pipe that brings the water to the people, not the water itself, right? Making sure that whatever is in existence can get to the people who need it the most. So thinking about it from the economic prosperity perspective, I mean, this is a huge part of what we do around social prosperity and economic prosperity. And we frame economic prosperity as the sustained financial and personal well-being. I said it wrong. Sustained financial and personal well-being where growth is actually possible. So meaning that we are connecting community members that we serve to those resources, helping them build shared wealth and creating real opportunities of growth on a personal level and on a community level. So when we talk about that working directly with individuals, that is helping them navigate barriers to access, barriers to career opportunities, barriers to growing a business or starting a business. I mean, I used to work at the University of Vermont, and something that we had worked on was this USDA project where policies were getting in the way of people accessing different opportunities. Specifically around agritourism, but we're seeing it here in the state, right? When we're working with businesses, they're not able to build the businesses that they want at the scale that they want because the policies that are created are not taking them into mind and how they are actually implemented. So we're trying to create some of those access points, introducing businesses specifically to, for example, the Vermont Small Business Law Center, which is a resource from the Vermont Small Law and Graduate School that offers free legal education and 10 hours of free legal consult with a bar-approved lawyer to small business owners. That's a critical resource for individuals. We work with Allison all the time over at the Vermont Language Justice Project, making sure that we are sharing the different points of resource, the information that they are creating so that the community can have access. I have so much to say, but and I apologize. So part of it is working directly with individuals. And then the other part of what we do is working with, looking at the existing statewide systems. Our systems are broken, they are unstable. And so how do we work with employers and also statewide leaders to identify those pain points, those barrier points, right? Because the Vermont workforce landscape has a lot of opportunities. We have so many incredible individuals here from the immigrant community who have so many incredible skills, and they're underutilized. Thinking specifically about the medical professionals, right? When we have a lot of folks who are well-trained medical professionals in our community, and yet they're not able to practice because there is not a clear or easy way to become certified in what they have already been trained on. So these are conversations that are happening at a state level, but what are we missing out? We have a great need for medical professionals. And in rural areas in Burlington itself, and yet we're not tapping into these resources. Another area of barrier is, of course, language access, as we've been talking about, and also job training. There are a lot of jobs out there and a lot of people who need jobs, and yet there's a mismatch, as we are seeing as an organization, of what those jobs are versus what the skills are out there. So how do we actually get folks trained into the jobs that are available, the jobs that will help them build those opportunities for career growth, for generating wealth? And a lot of those things you can say are really expensive, and yet what are we losing out? This is not a conversation that has been happening for the last year or two. This is a conversation that has been happening for decades. Like, I have literally been in the same conversations for at least the last 10 years. So how do we support community members by investing in them, investing in our systems that make it possible for them to be to do the things that they love, to do the things that they want to be doing with the skills that they have. So I think there are a lot of gaps there. And I will just say, we as an organization, we're trying to be as adaptive as possible, especially in this landscape because of the instability. It's scary out there. Like, do we want our staff out there? Do we want our communities out there? What are they going to be expecting? And so we are working with the community, trying to gather information about what is they need. So we don't necessarily have static programming, but the things that are consistent are direct support for individuals and business owners, making sure that we have community spaces, networking opportunities, and as well as community building spaces. Yeah, because something that my colleague, Tino, who's my co-ED, usually says is when the immigrant, refugee, BIPOC community thrives economically, our entire community benefits, our entire state benefits. So I will leave it there.
Thank you, Wei Wei. Miriam, you and your team support the transition of newly arrived immigrant families, particularly in helping students succeed academically and socially. Can you walk us through how the Burlington School District supports new American families and how your approach has evolved over time?
I'll do my best to summarize, but before I do, I just want to highlight or spotlight words that I keep hearing being used across this panel: access and justice. And I think that's what we're all about. All of us see access as a means to justice. And so without access, there can't be any kind of equity of opportunity or any kind of success, however you measure that, economically, socially, or otherwise, for any community, never mind a diverse one. So I just appreciate those themes weaving their way through what all of us have to say. So the question is interesting because it says newly arrived immigrant families, and as Pablo's presentation pointed out, right now we don't have newly arrived immigrant families. I came to Burlington in 2015, right in the heyday, I guess, of the Bhutanese, Burmese, Iraqi, DRC kind of richness that was coming to Burlington every day, and it was an extremely exciting time. And in fact, I moved here from a much larger urban area because percentage-wise, there was a higher percentage of multilingual students entering the Burlington School District than there was in the larger urban area that I had come from. The first thing I did, to be perfectly honest with you, is to make connections. I spent about a year trying to get to know the landscape of Burlington. And as you said, there's just a wealth of community organizations, of people who want to help, who lean in instead of lean back from the notion of new people arriving, and have tremendous goodwill around trying to support those people, be they children or families. Just because they have goodwill doesn't mean the connection is always made or that the connection is always an appropriate or a strong one, but I felt that very much when I came to Burlington, and it was really inspirational to me. And following a tradition that had been in place long before I got here, I wanted to keep students who were at the very beginning of becoming emergent bilinguals. I wanted to keep them safe, linguistically safe, socially safe, culturally safe. So we had a network of newcomer programs that taught what we like to refer to as schooliness, which basically means adaptation to American schools and schoolings, the rituals and routines of which are very different from those of people's experiences elsewhere in the world, never mind those who might have not ever had an opportunity for formal schooling or might have had that interrupted. We had a large number of those students coming in. And so we kind of circled the wagons a little bit around those kids and made sure that they had newcomer programs that combined content area learning, learning the ways to go to school and how to be successful in American schools, which is a very particular thing, and also had access to language that was sheltered and adapted to their needs. And I don't think there was anything wrong-headed about that, but those ideas do not meet this moment at all. And both through a change of mindset and change of heart and through necessity, we've expanded, I guess, the kinds of things that we offer. And I'll just talk a little bit about going from sheltering linguistically and culturally to a fuller model of inclusion to now a different kind of sheltering, which has to do with political violence and physical safety that students are vulnerable to. I'm not going to describe the whole 11 years, but I will say this. In the time that I've been here, we have promoted co-teaching, where a history teacher will teach alongside someone who's a specialist in language acquisition, and together they will work to help students gain access to the mainstream curriculum. This is after lots of pushing, catching on kind of like wildfire across Burlington, and the early results are really great. It removes the stigma, it removes the separation, that ghetto-like feeling that can evolve in those increasingly or well-intended but increasingly narrow options that segregated or completely sheltered classrooms offer. So co-teaching is one thing that's happening. We have a large and well-trained group of teachers who work kindergarten through grade 12. We do consultation with pre-kindergarten groups. We collaborate a great deal with special educators so that we can understand one another culturally. What counts as a disability, for example, and the names of those disabilities in English. Very triggering, very different for families who hear them coming from another context, and there's a struggle there. To not talk would be the absolutely worst way to address those challenges, and so we've spent a great deal of time learning from one another in a way that I'm very proud to claim as two-way, not just special educators telling us what the law in Vermont says, but our multilingual liaisons and our families telling the special educators, this is what you need to pay attention to. And here's how I see my child. Let's see if we can come to some agreement around the best ways to educate that child together. I mentioned multilingual liaisons. We have a cadre of 11 full-time multilingual liaisons. They are interpreters, for sure. Most of them speak 4, 5, or more languages, but they are also cultural brokers, which is a term that other agencies around town have adopted since we began talking about them that way. They try to help people from different cultural backgrounds understand each other, not just through language, but through an explanation of cultural norms, and not cultural norms, let's say, that you would find in Bhutan, but cultural norms that you would find in the Bhutanese Nepali-speaking community of Burlington in 2026, which is a very different thing. These folks are my best friends. They're my family. I would do anything for them. And like, just referring to what you said a moment ago, many of them were teachers in their countries of origin, or had tremendous stature in their countries of origin and came here only to discover that they couldn't do those things. Their decisions to protect and advocate for and yet continue to belong to their own communities of origin in Burlington is something I have such profound respect for. And honestly, come to Burlington someday and visit with the multilingual liaisons as they're sitting here with a family over here that speaks one language, a family over here that speaks another, a family over there that speaks another, and the same person who might have been a graduate of Burlington High School just a few years ago is simultaneously translating for all those families and helping them understand what just happened in the IEP meeting that they left a few moments ago. So the people have tremendous skill. People around Vermont are jealous of us and have started to copy this way, this very human and interactive and not at all AI way of helping people connect. We have a parent university. It's free to anyone who has any connection with the Burlington School District at all. In our parent university, we offer English classes of all different kinds, and we change them up based on what folks tell us they would like to learn about. We went fully remote during COVID, we came back, and we continue to grow and thrive. We have technology classes, we have nutrition classes, we have parenting classes that are not at all about American parents telling foreign-born parents how to parent their kids, but the opposite, and engaging in dialogue and often argument, which I think is beautifully rich and wonderful. We have a heritage language program. Actually, the leader of that heritage language program is here in the audience. Hi, Sina. It has had its ups and downs, but basically the idea is no one should ever go underground with their heritage language or lose it. One of my favorite T-shirts, which has fallen apart on my body, is the one that says "Blessed with bilingual brains." And not only is there a cognitive advantage to bilingualism, but there's a social and cultural advantage and power to bilingualism, which your typical, so sorry if this sounds like a put down, but your typical 7th grade Spanish sombrero Cinco de Mayo class is not gonna get you there. So we try to do a better job of that and encourage students to maintain their original languages and to respect, honor, participate in, and adapt and grow within their cultures of origin. Certainly, we've seen changing demographics. There used to be huge numbers of Nepali-speaking students. Most of the Nepali-speaking students now are generation 2.0 to 3.0. And I'm not saying they don't continue to need our supports and services. Many of them do. But we've shifted our attention most recently to Spanish speakers, which I'm so happy to have a presence in our schools. There was almost none when I got here. And one of the things we concentrate on is sort of precision in our program placement and our identification of student needs at the outset, and in interviewing families and students themselves to determine as much as we can about their educational history, so that instead of saying, all you EL folks go over here, we can say, well, you've had access to higher education. Man, you're doing algebra. Go here. And it's our job to figure out a way to support you rather than your job to adapt to everything we are offering within the Burlington School District. I'm really pleased to have relationships with entities around the community like Vermont Language Justice Project. I was there at the beginning and then moved away, and then never moved away, just I'm busy. But we're still there, and because we have similar goals, not just that everybody learns to speak English, and not just that everybody learns to be a polyglot, but that we think carefully and consciously about access to things through language. And that counts just as much for the 5-year-old who's enrolling in kindergarten for the first time in September as it does for their parent or maybe even grandparent who settled in Burlington 2 generations ago from the Bosnian community, just as an example. So just being thoughtful about that, I think, is what drives our work, certainly is what drives my work. Never making assumptions that I know automatically what a student from this culture or this language background is going to be like, what they're going to aspire to, what they're going to need, what they're going to want, but trying to study that as we study all of our students. We can't do right by them until we know them. And I think all students are subject to stereotyping, but students from different language and cultural backgrounds are very often subjects of tremendous stereotyping. And I fight against that, and the team of individuals I fight against that with have tremendous skill in that area. We're not afraid to raise our hands and say, no, that was, the folks who got here in 2000. It's not the folks who are arriving in 2026. So it's a very active and multifaceted job with lots of different components. I don't think any one of those pieces I've just described, whether it's serviced by well-qualified teachers who have a background in understanding second language acquisition and understanding the interplay of language and content, moving from them to the multilingual liaisons, to the heritage language programs, to Parent University, to the summer programs that we run for students. We have one summer program where we actually pay high school students to produce content that teaches their teachers how to be more effective teachers of them. It's called Pathfinder. You can find videos that kids have produced on the Burlington School District website, and we use those as professional learning for any teacher working in Burlington, and actually some of that has taken hold across the state, which I'm proud of too. I'll have to mention, in addition to Vermont Language Justice, the Howard Center, the Family Room, USCRI, Office of Refugee Resettlement, folks at University of Vermont, Middlebury College, Champlain College, lots of different places that we connect with. And together, we sort of hold these kids and families. And now, we really do hold them in the sense of sheltering them and protecting them from threats that were referred to earlier. I made a really ridiculous statement early on in Trump 2.0, which is that if anyone was going to come and get a foreign-born student from the Burlington School District to take them into ICE custody, they would have to come through my body. And I still mean it. We've put procedures in place that are intended to shelter and keep kids safe. And we've also put some things in place, including some things made by students to remind students and families it's important to come to school, because school is a safe place for you, relatively speaking, and that we are here for you and your family and always will be. And I'm sad that the notion of shelter has had to come to that. On the other hand, if school's not a part of that and we just view ourselves as neutral, which I think is an impossibility, then I view us as playing into the hands of people who would deliberately harm refugee, immigrant, and multilingual background people in this country and far beyond. And that's sure not what I came into education to do. I'm going to end with a brief commercial. On the 1st and 2nd of May, we meaning the Burlington School District and the Vermont EL Leaders Collective, which is a group of people who share similar positions similar to mine across the state of Vermont. We'll be holding a conference at St. Michael's College in the Roy Room of the Dion Center. I will send information to anybody who likes it, but I also would like to have it, but also put it on our website. It is meant to be not a conference for educators, but a conference for students, families, local community organizers, agencies who support refugee and immigrant background folks, and educators. It's called Come to the Table, because the format that we found to be really great is when people sit together and just talk about some of the issues that are being addressed tonight. So it's free, and I hope you will all come. Again, it's on the Burlington School District's website. You can find out more there. Thank you.
Thank you, Miriam. Melissa, before I ask your question, just an addendum from the higher ed lens and kind of bridging Weiwei's work in higher ed. We're kind of the bridge between the K-12 and the economic opportunities. Just to let you all know that University of Vermont is trying to improve our coordination and strategic approach towards how we engage community partners, especially around pathways and opportunities to higher education broadly, not just the University of Vermont. But then also, we, in case you don't know, as you mentioned, Weiwei, access is also about information. And a lot of people don't know that University of Vermont has something known as a Vermont Promise now, in which any family with less than $100,000 of household income is tuition free at University of Vermont. And so there are many different organizations and school districts that various people at University of Vermont work with, and we are trying to improve that experience for community partners, because we know that many people engage different parts of the university where the left hand often doesn't know where the right hand is doing. And so I just want you all to know that we're working towards getting more strategic and collaborative to improve those partnerships to strengthen these pathways that we know are necessary to higher education for our young people, and for in particular those from immigrant families. So Melissa,
Yes.
faith communities have long played a role in welcoming and supporting immigrants. Can you share some of that history in Vermont and how Vermont Interfaith Action has mobilized over the years in response to increased ICE enforcements, both locally and nationally?
Yes, so first of all, I now know why a lot of immigrant families live in Chittenden County. I wish that we had some of the services for my kids down in Washington County that you all have up here. So, faith communities, like what Pablo was talking about earlier, when you have immigrants come to an area, they're going to gravitate together in language, but not just language and faith, right? And so there's a long history as the Irish and Italians and French Canadians were migrating into Vermont, they would coalesce and build congregations based on their faith traditions. And we see that all across the United States, or all across Vermont, let alone all across the United States. More recently, if you go to the Islamic Society of Vermont during the month of Ramadan, every Saturday and Sunday evening, they come together as a community, and different ethnic groups take an evening iftar meal, and they prepare the food for all of the Muslims and the guests that come to break the fast and then share and meal together. So there's a rich history in Vermont of coming together as a faith community. In terms of working with immigrants and in protecting immigrants, in the 1980s, when the U.S. government opposed granting asylum to seekers from Central America, particularly Guatemala, there was a whole host of networking among the faith communities to provide sanctuary. There was the sanctuary movement of the 80s, right? And in New England, congregations played a huge role in that, but there were congregations in Vermont that were part of that sanctuary movement. And so over the years, I've been with Vermont Interfaith Action now for close to 17 years, and over the years, what I've seen our role in this be is we've gone from the one immigration story that we had was the fact that my husband was having a hard time getting his green card because the U.S. Custom and Border agent that we were working with could not understand that they had to contact the Israeli embassy to get his criminal background record that we couldn't just hand it over to them, right? So we started from that point to now. What we have been doing for the last year and a half, 2 years is we have a campaign called the Vermont Community Resilience Campaign, which is our response in the faith community to providing support for the immigrant families within our networks and within our communities. The other piece that that has become more apparent in the last 6 months is the clergy across Vermont, whether they are currently connected with Vermont Interfaith Action or they've just heard about us, are reaching out to us and standing up and saying, we can't keep silent anymore, because to be silent right now in this moment is to be complicit. And I think that that's a reflection of what the ideas of the faith community have had in their shared moral call to welcome the stranger and care for neighbors, right? And so we've seen our folks organizing more and more. They are being public witness by accompanying people to their immigration hearings, whether it be up here in St. Albans or down in the southern part of the state, heading over to Albany, New York, to accompany folks that live in Vermont who have to go in to check in for their appointments. Whether that is being public witnesses in gatherings, like going to the data center in Williston and singing songs and reading names and saying prayers and poems and scriptures. Some of our congregations are actual sanctuaries. We have a handful of congregations, particularly in the Chittenden area, whose denominations went to court and sued the government for what they were doing, and they now are looked at as safe sanctuary spaces. And then we've been working in partnership. We work closely with Migrant Justice. We've held a number of rapid response trainings where we get our folks and we ask them to come in and train, and then our folks go and are part of that network of 3,500 Vermonters who are called to action. We show up when they call us to show up in positions. And I will also put a plug, because on May 8th, there's an entity that's come together called Ice Out Vermont. And we will be holding a demonstration as well as a nonviolent direct action up in St. Albans around ICE and detention. Check out the website, Ice Out Vermont, if you want to be a part of it. There's trainings that have been going on the weekends and nonviolent direct action, and there's several others that are still taking place between now and May 8th. But that's the type of work that we've been involved in. One other thing that we have done is we've also had a call from our sibling federation out in Minneapolis. And so back in January, I actually led 8 clergy, and then we had about another dozen or so from Vermont join us in Minneapolis to just stand alongside our brothers and sisters, our siblings out there. And I think that that was a catalyst that has brought back that desire to be more of a public witness and accompany and do all the other work. So I'll keep my remarks short because I know we're heading over a little bit.
Thank you, Melissa. So thankful for your work. Thanks to all of you as panelists. We're really grateful for all of you. Yes. So I'm really sorry we didn't end up having time for Q&A. I really apologize. For those who are willing to stay back, hopefully we can at least have conversations, at least for those who are in the room. I want to thank sincerely Laura Sanchez Parkinson, Ward 3 Burlington City Councilor, for pulling this program together. I want to thank the Racial Equity, Inclusion, Belonging Office from the City of Burlington for being a tremendous partner and helping us work together to pull this program together. Want to thank all the panelists. Really, it's been our honor. We are hoping at University of Vermont to engage more deeply. I also failed to mention earlier that we have a lot of immigrant employees, and all employees at University of Vermont get to attend University of Vermont tuition free, as well as their children. And that's a very unusual benefit at institutions these days. So again, that's all part of spreading the information of the resources. As you mentioned, we have tremendous resources in this community and in Vermont. And I want to thank also Dr. Pablo Bose for his great presentation. He may have left, but really thankful to all his work. Thank you all for being here.